Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on your lunch break today and our AI for Climate webinar that we've got running today. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands that we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. In Brisbane, where Claire and I are based, that is the Turrbal and the Yuggera people. I invite you to let us know which lands you join us on today by using the chat function on the right, and we'll see how far and wide we are meeting today across our country. Let's make a start. The session's made up of 3 parts. You'll firstly hear from Mahesh, who will open with a background to today's webinar and how this follows on from the AI for Climate symposium we held last year. Claire will then give an overview of the AI for Climate R&D roadmap, which we've recently released. Our next step is in exploring opportunities to collaborate and leverage AI to tackle our greatest climate challenges. And there is an invitation to you all to provide input as part of this consultation process. And lastly, we'll close out with our panel discussion, where you will meet 3 of our scientists working at the intersection of AI and climate, and that's Mahesh, Geoff, and Cara. I welcome you to join in today. There's 2 kind of little icons that you have on the right-hand side there, where you'll be able to ask a question of the panel by using the button that's got the question mark, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Otherwise, please feel free to use the chat, the share button, there's like a little bubble that you use to share your thoughts. And if you're having any technical issues, please pop them in the chat and the team will do their best to assist you. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Mahesh Prakash. Mahesh is a senior principal research scientist that leads a research portfolio focused on the use of analytical and modelling approaches to a range of environmental, agricultural, and natural hazard domains. An example of this is use our Spark tool, which can support emergency management agencies in simulating the potential spread of a wildfire. Over to you, Mahesh.
Thanks, Moana, for that introduction. And hi, everyone, and thanks for joining in this exciting webinar series. So just to give you a bit of background and context, as Moana mentioned, few of us at CSIRO actually organized an AI for Climate symposium last year. This was in October last year at the State Library in Victoria. And one of the key reasons why we organized that symposium is because there is a clear and present climate challenge that faces all of us. And there are quite interesting tools that are coming up, using AI technology that are already being utilized to actually deal with those challenges, both from a mitigation and adaptation perspective. And so this particular symposium was organized to kind of understand, not just in an Australian context, but also globally, how AI is being used to tackle these challenges. And we also wanted to use the symposium to understand to what extent AI itself is having an impact on changing climate. So that's probably one of the negative impacts of AI not being used in the way it could be or it should be. And I see the symposium as the beginning of our research endeavors so that it can actually the research that we do in CSIRO is more closely aligned with what the market needs are or what the market gaps are. So we learned a lot from speakers from various parts of the world, including Australia. So we had the pleasure of inviting speakers from the US, from the UK, as well as experts from Australia, in trying to get a really good understanding of where things are heading in an AI for climate context. And we want to continue that conversation utilizing this webcast, but also use the webcast as a forum to kind of see where to next, because this journey is just beginning. Thanks for that, and I'll pass it on to Moana.
Thanks, Mahesh. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce you to Claire. Claire is a principal research consultant who leads our digital futures team, and she specialises in future-focused approaches that aim to provide the evidence base and strategic direction for organisations. Claire has led this roadmap report, along with other high-profile reports, such as our CSIRO's Once in a Decade Global Megatrends Report, Our Future World. Over to you, Claire.
Thanks so much, Moana, and so excited to be with you guys here today, sharing the latest in our AI for Climate R&D roadmap. As mentioned, I'm Claire Naughtin. I had the pleasure of leading this work, and I'm going to give you a bit of a sense around some of the key insights that came out of this work for us. Now, this work was really focused around this following question. How can we use AI to help us better prepare for and to mitigate the future climate challenges on our horizon? Now, this is a question that I trust you yourself might have already started to ponder about. By joining today's webinar, you might have already started to think about, how can AI help my organization in thinking through the different climate mitigation and the different climate adaptation opportunities and strategies that it could be considering. So we'll get some time to go through that today. And so we're going to unpack this question in 3 different ways. We're first going to look at the how. So how can we use AI to help us mitigate emissions and adapt to changing climate conditions? We're then going to look at how we can use AI responsibly and some of the considerations or concerns that might exist in this space when we're using AI in climate applications. And finally, and most importantly, we're going to look at how we can use AI and how we can best collaborate around these future AI for climate opportunities. We're going to give you a sense around what some of the options might look like in this space and how we can best come together around this emerging space. Now, I'm going to give you plenty of opportunities to engage with and to really get the most out of today's session. What I hope you'll see as we go through this work and certainly what we've discovered through this roadmap development is that AI can help us with a number of different climate challenges. It's a general purpose technology that we can do a lot of different things and a lot of different applications with. But in order to make the most of these opportunities, we need to come together in new ways. And this webinar really serves as the opportunity and the invitation to join us in this AI for climate journey. So to help you share your thoughts and get involved in the conversation today, Moana mentioned that there's a couple of different channels on the webinar that allows you to do so. So we have the little question mark bubble. That's where you can submit your questions as we're going through the content today. It's your chance to ask us what questions you have around AI for climate spaces. And we'll have time during our panel discussion to go through some of that. And you also have the chat function, which it's great to see so many of you are already engaging in that space. It's your space to share your thoughts, ideas, and I guess expectations in this space. And I'm going to give you plenty of opportunities for you to do so with your first one coming up right now. So I want you to let me know in the chat, how much do you feel AI will help you in navigating future climate challenges? Let me know in the chat on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 reflects AI reflecting next to no impact on how we tackle our climate challenges, all the way up to 10, being AI can have a transformative impact on the way we tackle these climate challenges. So let me know in the chat, scale of 1 to 10, how much you feel AI will help us in navigating our future climate challenges. And now the reason I really want to know this question is because it gives us a sense around how you're thinking about this topic, what matters most to you, and I guess how you think about this concept. Whoa, okay, we're getting some responses coming through now, which is great to see. Well, okay, so I can see a lot of 10s, 8s, 5s, 7s, 9. Okay, I think I'm going to need to get some AI to help me analyze some of these questions. But if I can scan these numbers roughly, we can see that we're generally leaning towards that upper end of the spectrum. And the reason why that's interesting is because this largely aligns with what Boston Consulting Group found when they asked global leaders this exact same question. So they found that global leaders that are either working in climate or AI related spaces, around 87% of them thought AI could help them in tackling these challenges. But here's the catch. Of those same global leaders, only 43% knew how to use AI as part of their climate efforts. And so not 87% of them, not even half of them, but 43% knew how AI could be helpful as part of their climate efforts. And so these two results show this difference that we often see in this space. A difference between the opportunity to use AI as part of our climate efforts and the how, the knowledge, the skills, the expertise, the tools. How do we actually make the most of this technology? And it's bridging this gap that we aim to achieve through this roadmap and as part of the conversation that we're starting today. So with that, let's start with the how. Let's break down some examples around how AI can help organisations in reducing their emissions and monitoring for those emissions, and adapting to emerging climate risks and adapting to the changing climate conditions we find ourselves in. I'm going to walk you through two examples that we highlight as part of this roadmap activity. With the first one being around how AI can help us when it comes to monitoring and reducing emissions. So the purpose around these applications is quite simple. You know, if we can't measure where our emissions are coming from, then we can't change them. And we're limited in our ability to move towards the net zero goals we might have in this space. So the example I've got here is Climate Trace. It's arguably one of the most comprehensive inventories that we have around greenhouse gas emissions globally. I want to get a sense around who's already heard about Climate Trace. If you have heard of Climate Trace, pop a little T in the chat. It'd be good to get a feel around how familiar we are with this platform. So this platform brings together over 90 trillion bytes of data. It gives us this really holistic picture around where emissions are coming from and the areas that require the most urgent attention. And now the really unique thing and the secret sauce around why this platform has been so successful was the collaboration that sits underneath it. This platform's been powered by, oh, great to see a few people are familiar with this platform. And so this platform's been powered by a coalition of researchers and advocates that came together, and they asked the question around, well, what could be possible if we joined forces, if we brought our data assets together? And AI has been critical in helping them bring these pieces together. Now, a second example I'll give is how AI can help us when it comes to predicting climate risks, such as bushfire events. So if you work in emergency management or if you're an asset manager, you'll know that time's really of the essence when it comes to these events. The sooner that we can intervene, the sooner that we can reduce the potential impact that these risks can have. So Google Research's FireSat platform has used AI combined with satellite data to help them detect bushfires when they're much smaller in size. They can detect them when they're just the size of a classroom, rather than having to wait for them to grow to several acres wide. An example from Australia comes from the Cooperative Research Centre for Smart Satellite Technologies and Analytics, and they've taken a slightly different approach to the same challenge. They've developed these small-scale satellites that have AI capabilities inbuilt on board, and it means that they can take images of the Earth and analyse them from space, saving time from having to send that data previously down to the ground for processing. So two examples around how we can get more timely insights and timely detection of these events. So now that we've got a bit of a sense around how AI could help us around our climate efforts, now I'm going to turn our attention to how do we ensure we're using it responsibly. You know, we want to make sure that we're using AI to help us create a better climate future in these spaces. So let me know in the chat where you stand around this topic. So do you think AI will have a net positive or a net negative impact on the climate? If you think it's going to have a net positive impact, pop a little P in the chat. Or if you think it's going to have a net negative impact, pop an N in the chat. And now the reason why I asked you this question is because it was a really popular topic that came up in our AI for Climate Symposium last year, particularly when we're talking about the energy associated with AI use. And so we see that with this, when we're thinking about AI applications around tackling climate change and supporting us in responding to changing climate conditions, we want to ensure that when we're using it in one space, it's not creating a new problem in a different space. We can see in the chat there's quite mixed responses around how we're thinking about this topic. There's different camps around whether we'll have a positive or negative impact, and let's break that down a little bit more. And so we know that AI is very data hungry, and the data centers that store this data, they can be incredibly energy intensive. And so the plot that I've got on the screen here shows us how the electricity demands associated with data centers in the US could change in the future. So in the most extremes, excuse me, let's try that again. In the most extreme scenario, we could see the electricity used by these data centers increasing by up to 15%. And so this could present significant energy demand around how these data centers it could present challenges around how we meet that growing energy demand. Now, what I want to flag around this is that it's really important for us to put these projections into perspective. So we know, for example, that the emissions associated with this electricity use will depend on where that energy is coming from. If these data centers are located in areas that have greater access to clean energy sources, then an increase in electricity use might not necessarily lead to an increase in emissions. We also know that the electricity demand associated with other forms of electrification could be much greater than what we see for data centers. So things like air conditioning or electric vehicles are projected to make up a much larger share of our future energy demand. But what this topic does highlight is the importance of thinking about these opportunities and these challenge spaces holistically. We want to ensure that we're considering both sides of the climate challenge, both the adaptation piece and the mitigation piece, as we're exploring these AI for climate opportunities. And so finally, I want to touch on how we can best collaborate and come together around some of these emerging spaces. I'm going to give you 3 different options that we've identified as part of our roadmap activity. And I want you to let me know which one of these lands the most for you. So the first one's around bringing together people that have the AI technical expertise and those that deeply understand the problem spaces or the industries that are looking to respond to these climate challenges. So Climate Change AI is an example here, which is a group that holds an annual online event that brings together over 10,000 collaborators that are working at the intersection between AI and climate. This online forum really provides a space for them to share use cases around how they're using AI and to gain practical hands-on experience around how AI could help them in their climate challenges. Now, the second option could be around establishing dedicated grand challenges or innovation hubs in specific climate-related AI areas. So the $100 million Bezos Earth Fund is an example around what that could look like. This is a dedicated fund that's been set up to accelerate AI activities that focus on specific climate challenges, areas like sustainable proteins, energy, and biodiversity applications. The Advice Hub is another example. It's a UK government-backed virtual centre of excellence that's focused on using AI around 7 key decarbonisation grand challenges. So these are spaces where AI is being used to improve soil health so that we can capture more carbon, or using AI to unlock some of the consumer opportunities that sit around decarbonisation. And then the final example is around how we could potentially use opportunities to expand the access when it comes to open access to climate-related data and models. The Climate Trace example that I went through earlier is an example around what that could look like. It's a platform that helps organisations move towards joint decarbonisation or adaptation goals, and it can support these organisations in working across those boundaries. And so these 3 options give us a bit of a tasting platter around what could be some potential mechanisms to support and accelerate collaboration in this space. So I want you to let me know in the chat, 1, 2, or 3, which one of these would be most helpful for you in your organisation in thinking through these future opportunities? Is it 1, around bringing together AI and domain experts? Is it 2, establishing dedicated grand challenges or innovation hubs? Or is it 3, opening access to climate-related data and models? And if you're looking at these 3 options and going, Claire, they're great, but I think there's something else missing, I want you to let me know what that is in the chat. We're all ears at this stage in terms of what would be the most effective and most helpful for you in your organisation in exploring these future opportunities. It's great to see that we've got some responses coming through. We're kind of leaning towards that 1 and 3 option, which is interesting to see. Again, keep them coming through. We're really keen to get your thoughts around what could be most helpful here. And so I hope that this has helped give you a bit of a taste around how AI can help us in a number of different ways when it comes to responding to these climate challenges. It can help us when it comes to reducing and monitoring for emissions, as well as detecting natural hazard events like bushfires, those examples we went through earlier. We've also touched upon some of the responsible use concerns and considerations around this tool, particularly when we're thinking about the energy associated with AI and the data centers that support them. And so this is really an opportunity and an imperative for us to think about new ways to come together and to collaborate around these AI for climate opportunities. So alongside the launch of this roadmap, this AI for climate R&D roadmap, we're holding a consultation period which allows you to provide an opportunity for your thoughts and your perspectives around how we can best collaborate to accelerate these AI for climate opportunities. We're going to be holding over the next month 2 potential channels through which you can engage with and provide this feedback, either through our online survey or through one of the virtual roundtable discussions that we're going to be holding. We're going to pop some details in the chat so you can have some further information around how you can engage with either one of these activities. Now, I really strongly encourage you to provide your input as part of this process. It's really your chance to help us shape this R&D agenda, to really help us ensure that it's best aligned to helping your organisation in navigating the changing climate conditions. And with that, we're going to segue now to our panel discussion, where we'll have the opportunity to hear from some of our CSIRO scientists that are already working at the intersection of AI and climate. If you haven't had a chance already to pop your questions in the Q&A part of the chat, again, it's that little question mark function, please do so. And we're going to get some time now to go through some of those questions. So I'm going to introduce the panel now, and you heard from Mahesh before, so Mahesh Prakash. Mahesh is one of the key proponents and one of the really key drivers behind this roadmap activity, and it's such a pleasure to have you again as part of this panel discussion. We also have today, Geoffrey Lee, who's one of our senior research scientists that helps organisations make decisions under uncertainty, which I feel like that must be a very common challenge that many organisations are grappling with. So Geoff uses quantitative modelling approaches to look at, for example, how climate impacts might impact specific sectors, like how it impacts critical infrastructure and other key domains. And finally, we have Cara Stitzlein, another one of our senior research scientists that specialises in human-centred design. So Cara's research focuses on supporting organisations through sustainability transitions, and she leverages design science approaches in doing so. So welcome, Mahesh, Geoff, and Cara. We'll get stuck into this. So Mahesh, I might kick off our discussion with you. If you can give us a sense around, I guess, we went through some examples around where AI is being used to help us model different climate events, like those bushfire examples, but also flooding and other extreme weather events. Can you give us a sense around what's unique or special about AI and helps in terms of how it helps us understand and manage these climate risks?
I guess, I've been actually thinking about what is so unique about AI. And I think one of the key things that I'm kind of excited about is how you can use AI to deal with a multitude of these problems. I mean, traditionally, what has happened is we have built models to deal with specific issues that we have had. And while that's actually worked well, there is a real opportunity to kind of bring in a whole range of data sets that might be relevant to actually tell you whether there is a risk for a particular sector or for a particular region. The kind of foundation models that are being built at the moment actually genuinely are starting to allow you to do that. So, take structured data, take unstructured data, take data that might be in text form or in numerical form or in an image form, and combine those to actually gain insights that's specific to your needs, specific to your sectoral needs. Now, we haven't actually completely solved that problem. I mean, there's still challenges, research challenges associated with how you might go about doing that, but it's coming, right? It's actually very exciting. And that's the bit that actually I think will drive the adoption of AI in dealing with climate change.
Fantastic. Geoff, I might throw to you next. Can you give us a sense around how we balance using AI in this space with its impact on the environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, Claire, you touched on it earlier around what sources the energy being utilized to perform these and calibrate these AI models. is going to be the crucial aspect of that. But it's definitely something that we really need to be concerned about, is while we are adopting these AI tools and they hope that they're going to be useful for us, it's also about making sure that we balance that, making sure that essentially the provenance of that energy that it's been going into being constructing these AI models is known. So again, that may involve AI to be able to know the provenance of that and being able to measure the emissions associated with that. But it's certainly going to be very important going forward.
Yeah, fantastic. Cara, I'm going to jump to you next. And we've heard a lot about the technical, I guess, challenges around tackling these climate spaces and some of the opportunities that exist around AI. But we know that that tackling these challenges often requires more than a strictly technical solution. So I wonder if you can give me a sense around how you can bring a human-centric lens when it comes to working in AI for climate applications.
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to this, Claire. When we take a human-centric or user-centered design approach, it means we include people in the development process. We listen to them and we understand kind of what the bigger picture is for them when they're interacting with these tools. And from that, we develop an understanding of the broader context, and that's really important because then we can be much more targeted in the type of solution that we're developing. Activities like the design sprint that we did in the AI for Climate Symposium is a good example of how working in this way helps you to test some early assumptions and make connections with your stakeholders. There was one team looking at medical supply chains, and an experienced professional was sitting at the table and talking about their day-to-day work and the technology that was already in use. And it was really important for the rest of the team to hear this because it quickly ruled out areas where AI wasn't going to help because the problem had already been solved. And so then that immediately had them direct more attention to other areas of the supply chain that had greater need. If I could give another example from the design sprint, is through a human-centered design approach that we can see things that are kind of living around the AI and climate components. And that understanding that can have us provide shape to the science and technology that will emerge. There were a couple of teams working on energy efficiency. And in one group, they spent time sharing their lived experiences in the home. And it led them to develop a really clever solution that connected their white good activity with the manufacturers of these white goods, with the local councils, with their EV cars, and so on. And so this allowed them to improve information quality and resource availability at that community level. Now, you compare that with another team also working on energy efficiency, but they were looking at it from a business context. So immediately there's different components that come into the conversation. The human-centric approach had them focus on emissions tracking, annual reporting requirements, and grander scale investments. All that to say that context matters, and a human-centric approach allows you to unpack that and incorporate it into your development process.
Fantastic. Great to hear those examples there. And it really shows we get a different result if we take a different context and a different lens to the problem. Mahesh, I see that agriculture was part of your job title, as in one of the areas that you touch upon as part of your research portfolio. Can you give us some specific examples around how AI is being used in agriculture contexts currently?
Look, I can give you lots of examples. I guess the one that I'm closely involved in is Climate Services for Agriculture, which is essentially a program that has been funded by the Future Drought Fund and administered by the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. So we are working alongside the Bureau of Meteorology there to provide insights to farmers and farm advisors mainly, but also generally to the ag sector, so they can actually deal with climate change more in an adaptation context than in a mitigation context. So it's a national scale project, and it's one way of actually showing how you can, combine data with a range of different AI techniques, but also with the human-centered design aspects that Cara mentioned, so that you can target the solution to the specific needs of the stakeholders that you're working with. I guess that's just one example, right? I mean, there are other examples within CSIRO and Data 61 where you've got the robotics team within Data 61 that's actually working with the ag sector to provide them support with how to kind of include robotics in their agricultural practice. But again, even over there, human-centered design is critical. You can't just go, look, I've been using robotics in a mining context, I'll just redeploy it in the ag sector, because the way mining works is very different from the way things work in the ag space, right? And to Kara's point, and in some ways, this is something that I feel I only realized this a few weeks ago. AI is actually is a toolkit that actually helps you to improve adoption through design thinking and human-centered design, because I suppose the mundane work, the technology work that you would probably do in a more manual manner before, that's actually reduced. So it actually improves your ability to think more design, think more strategy, right? And so that's actually a big advantage. And if you develop tools in that manner, the ability for it to be adopted actually becomes much higher.
Fascinating. So you're saying that AI can help us enhance the human aspect around some of these applications and our capacity to lean into those human, I guess, strengths.
Yep.
Love that. Jeff, we know that extreme weather events, they have far-reaching impacts. They don't just often impact one sector or one system, but they can have far-reaching impacts across multiple systems. Can AI help us with these direct and these flow-on impacts that climate events can have across multiple different sectors?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing here is, I think Mahesh had already touched on the geospatial foundation models, and that is being able to better quantify impacts at scale, so across a national level from extreme events. And so this gives you more accurate damage measures across multiple sectors. So you can look at transport networks, such as the rail and road infrastructure, but also other impacts to natural capital and impacts in farming and agriculture as well. So that's one side of things. Another one is around this understanding critical pathways. So this is more around those cascading impacts. What happens when you have a road damage? You don't just get impacts on that road infrastructure itself, but you also see this cascading impact across people unable to go to work, losing productivity in the economy, problems with accessing emergency services. Similarly, in like if you have a mobile phone outage due to a mobile phone cell tower getting damaged, you'll see these things. And AI, in this sense, we can use machine learning and graph-based modeling then to understand the connections between these different pieces of infrastructure and also hazard events, but also this cascading, modeling these cascading impacts and the criticality of those. So there's work here underway around understanding some of those in CSIRO and in other places as well. The other interesting link there between AI being able to help this cascading impact, it's also cascading in time, taking some of the information that we see from climate modeling from the longer term into the weather, these extreme events that we observe in day-to-day usage in terms of weather, and how that interacts with things like energy demand, electricity usage, around that. So again, there's work being done in the ARC Centre of Excellence for the Weather for the 21st Century, and work with CSIRO in terms of the National Energy Analysis Centre.
Fantastic. That's a beautiful segue, Jeff. So thank you so much for my next question. Mahesh, I'm going to jump back to you. Staying on that weather train of thought, can you give us a sense around how AI is being used to take longer term climate data and input it so we can have better daily and weekly weather forecasts? Can we get better at forecasting if it's actually going to rain tomorrow or not?
Look, I'll leave that question to the Bureau, whether we can actually predict whether it's going to rain tomorrow or not. But definitely, a range of AI tools can help with improving weather predictions, and there's work that's underway both in Australia as well as globally in that context. I guess I'll just give you a little bit of an insight on how that might actually happen, right? So, a lot of these climate models produce massive amounts of data. Okay, so it's data that has traditionally not been able to use has not been able to be used in its entirety because of the size of the data. Okay, and again, I'll go back to the ag sector because that seems to be my favorite sector. Um, Seasonal forecasting, which is not 7-day weather forecasting, it's actually forecasting beyond 7 days, a month, 3 months. That kind of data gets used by the agricultural sector and increasingly now by other sectors as well for better planning. And they are notorious. They're very difficult to deal with because of even though it's short-term forecasting, they're kind of longer term than 7-day weather forecasting. And it's almost like a data-rich environment, but an insights-poor environment. Okay, so AI is at the moment is being used to actually harness all the data that one produces in the seasonal forecast space to see how you can gain better insights from that data and make your kind of medium-term predictions much better than it is right now.
Yeah, fantastic. Cara, something that we haven't yet talked about so much is, I guess, the newer forms of AI when it comes to generative AI and large language models, our chat GPTs of the world. Do you have some thoughts around how those technologies play a role in these climate spaces? And maybe I'm going to give you a shameless opportunity to give a bit of a plug to some of the work that you're doing in that space.
All right, thanks, Claire. The first thing that I've learned about generative AI, being a non-AI expert, is just how quickly it has become quite disruptive and how quickly that space is moving. It is hard to keep up with from a commercial standpoint, much less a research standpoint, but we try. And one of the opportunities that I've been fortunate to have is through the Responsible Innovation Future Science platform, where we've been able to ask questions about future science and technology trends right on the cusp or a few years prior to the big boom. Within that piece of work, we've looked at generative AI. We've experimented with different AI methods in the problem space of corporate climate risk reporting. And through that experimentation, we really want to find some novel ways of promoting action and accountability so that companies are more likely to go beyond the tick box exercise that's becoming quite common and move beyond that to just preparing more robust reports that are also very actionable and meaningful for both the company and the broader industry. I'll share that we've used a human-centered approach in this project. We've gone down the path of working very quickly to develop a proof of concept tool, a tangible little thing that we can put out there and have a user trial with. And the use of these early stage tools is so very important for testing our assumptions about what's going to have value, as well as testing some of those hypotheses about responsibility and fairness and privacy and what happens when a tool like this gets out into the world. We're able to ask questions of our users around, is it fair? Can you imagine people or entities being discriminated against with something like this out there? And being able to think and grapple with those questions at an early stage makes us so much more robust and prepared to deploy these technologies in a responsible way.
Mahesh, I saw you were nodding your head quite enthusiastically there. Is there more you'd like to add in that space?
Oh, look, I mean, as Cara mentioned, that the generative AI space is both exciting and scary at the same time, right? I can think of a few, like, I mean, the term generative is actually an interesting term, right? Because it can generate garbage or it can actually generate things that are quite trustworthy in nature. And so the questions that we keep asking is, well, one question is, what are the use cases that can actually afford the generative AI to be kind of generative without a huge issue associated with it? And then there are issues with hallucinations that a lot of us are aware of with these sorts of AI tools, right? They tend to actually make things up. And so when it comes to providing trustworthy advice, especially in sectors such as emergency management or in also even in in the ag sector or or planning or whatever, you do need to make sure that the outputs that's created by these tools are actually trustworthy in nature. On the other hand, there might be occasions where the generative nature of these tools, let's say if you're doing some future scenario modeling for urban planning, the generative nature of these tools might be actually quite useful, right? So it's horses for courses, and we just need to be mindful of what we are doing in these sorts of applications.
Fantastic. Jeff, I'm coming towards you now. I mentioned in my talk a little bit about how AI can be used with satellite data as part of some of these climate applications. Can you give us a sense around what models or frameworks are being considered state of art in this space? And is it computer vision, or is it something else that is most helpful when it comes to, say, modeling some of those climate risk applications?
I'll do my best. I'm not sure that I'm an expert in this particular piece of technology. I suspect there's certainly computer vision in there in terms of analyzing satellite imagery. I would have to defer to others, I think, to be able to better represent that. But in terms of how we utilize data more generally, certainly there is aspects of AI that is very useful in being able to leverage these different data sets and be able to stitch them together, whether it be structured or unstructured data. And so that is very much a use case where AI can help. Now, one of the challenges there is potentially, I think Mahesh said, there's lots of data out there, but people don't necessarily have the correct knowledge about who owns that data, whether they have access to it, and also whether or not this data is unified in a national sense. So certainly there's some challenges there to still overcome, but certainly AI is a useful tool in that regard.
Fantastic. Mahesh, all you wanted to add there?
Yeah, look, I think this is something that we have been exploring a fair bit. What can AI do with satellite data that traditional methodologies cannot? So just to give you a specific example, few of us have heard of deep learning, which is actually a computer vision style AI approach. And while that's still being used in a very productive manner, one of the challenges with deep learning approaches is for every region you're trying to use a deep learning model, you've got to train it. So you train it for a particular region, and then you actually go to another region and you see if it's actually giving you sensible answers in another region. The answer is it's not. Okay. So there is actually a field in AI called geospatial foundation models. So think of it as ChatGPT, but using geospatial data. Okay. Where one of the key differences between a deep learning approach and this approach is transfer learning becomes much easier just because of the way the algorithm has been set up. And we are exploring very early stages. We are exploring this in the context of a few applications in the space of bushfire detection. Mostly things like, can you actually reconstruct a bushfire better than you could in the past? One of the reasons why the emergency management sector is really interested in large-scale bushfire reconstructions is because due to cloud occlusion, smoke occlusion, historical data is very difficult to get. And so can you use foundation models, generative AI principles to actually get these sorts of outputs? So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, where the cutting edge is in terms of the use of satellite data for satellite data using AI techniques.
Fantastic. Cara, heads up, it's a bit of a long one, so bear with me. How could AI help decision makers such as councils, local councils, integrate climate change consideration right across their organisational decision making, from risk management through to housing, planning and waste? So particularly, how can AI help those who may not have the deep expertise around climate change incorporate it into their decision making?
That is a mammoth and wonderful question. Thank you, Jen. I'll just share a little bit of what I've learned over the last few years experimenting in this space. We've learned that councils need to solve for climate-related issues is super complex, and it requires information from all over the board, notwithstanding, climate science and climate data. And so their need to not only know what they don't know and then be able to kind of make connections across those different silos of information is something that's at the top of mind. And it's something that I've seen generative AI help with. Still keeping in mind some of the issues that Mahesh has just pointed out around hallucinations and the creation of misinformation. We can develop these tools in such a way and really direct it to certain knowledge bases to provide an experience where information is integrated as it's delivered to the user. And one of the advantages of being able to design a tool like that is you can take one sort of knowledge base or a couple of knowledge bases and position them so that they can serve the information needs of different stakeholders, some of whom are going to need a 101 sort of information level, others who are on the journey and are wanting to ask more complex questions of those different silos. In my view, being able to do something like that, break down information silos, and then in an equitable way provide an integration offering to a number of stakeholders is a way to kind of make that information more democratic, keeps everybody more likely to be on the same page, and then allows them to come in to make decisions based on that same information. And if you can have that consensus early on with some of these big decisions that councils and governments are needing to make, I'm hoping that you'd have a shorter time to making that decision.
Yeah, fantastic. Jeff?
Can I? Yeah, I was
go
going
for
to
it.
say,
Oh,
can
yeah.
I jump in there as well and add? Great answer, Cara. That was really. I guess what I want to add in there is that we can also add a benefit downstream of that, providing an integration piece and providing advice at that stage, but we can also incorporate climate risk and climate risk considerations into the investment decisions themselves. And I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is that it's not just limiting downside here. We're not these decisions that we can help with, that AI can help provide, are also upside investment and growth opportunities, as well as limiting downside and mitigation and adaptation strategies. So I want to be emphasize that point, is that AI can help with monitoring and measuring Scope 3 emissions and limiting downsides and quantifying the risk, but it can also add to this new investment, new growth opportunities. So it can help identify these areas as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for building upon that. Cara, we're handballing. Back to you.
No, this is such an important point. Thank you for raising that, Jeff, because there seems to be a tendency to focus on the climate risk. And we're starting to not give enough attention to the opportunities that come out of understanding your risk and the ability to bring in more information to even increase the size of that opportunity space. I'm not trying to blow sunshine and rainbows at people, but we can use the technology to think out of the box. And so when it's not following the same constraints that our business as usual brains are following, that is a really exciting research and industry frontier.
Amazing. Mahesh?
I'm going to add to what Cara just mentioned, because this is something that I'm really, really passionate about. And thanks, Jeff and Cara. So I guess the thing is, there's a lot of there's a lot of, I suppose, fear, trepidation in industry around these climate disclosure requirements. Okay, so saying, oh, look, there's all this, things being thrust on us saying we've got to disclose what our climate risk profile is. In some ways, I see that as an opportunity as well, because once you understand your risk, you can actually do something about it and see it as an opportunity. So we have already kind of seeing, especially, kind of certain industries and local government kind of saying, look, I'm going to use the outputs from the risk assessment that I'm doing to better manage my operational needs. Okay. So that's a much nicer way of looking at it, as opposed to saying, actually, someone's asked me to disclose my climate risk.
Fantastic. Mahesh, I'm going to stay with you. There was one burning question that I was lining up for you. And that's, do you think AI can help us better understand the interactions between climate change and other environmental impacts? So the example that Matt's given is around assessing how water scarcity and biodiversity loss can either contribute to or become affected by climate change.
Oh, this is such a good question. I guess the one thing that I wanted to actually mention before is that it's not like climate is completely devolved from everything else that one should concern themselves with. And the work that Jeff and I have been doing around national climate risk assessment clearly demonstrates that climate, if you want to do a proper climate risk assessment, you've got to kind of look at the three aspects of it, right? So one of them is the climate hazard, the other one is the exposure to that hazard, and of the actual sectors that are exposed to that asset, and that particular hazard, and then the vulnerability. So the socioeconomic context of the risk, right? So and we are doing all those assessments already. But what AI will allow us to do is to actually combine all the relevant data sets and use that to actually provide insights for a range of different needs. We all of us are doing that at the moment. I'm not saying we are not, but we are doing that in a very siloed, piecemeal manner. But if you actually structure an AI platform in such a way that all the relevant data sets, structured and unstructured, are brought together, and the analysis piece is set up in such a way that it can gain insights for all these applications that you're talking about, I think we'll be in a great space. And I can't see that we are too far away from being able to do that.
That's fantastic to hear. Jeff, I want to get your thoughts around what are some of the AI tools that you can use for climate risk / opportunity assessments? I appreciate that's probably a big question.
Yeah, definitely. I can throw actually to Mahesh to talk about the tools that we are developing within CSIRO.
Look, I can talk about a few tools, right? They're all kind of quite diverse, actually. I can, start with the wonderful tool, the research tool that Cara and her team have developed, which is called EcoAction AI. And that actually is very much focused on getting industry and government to actually fast track their process of how do I actually do climate risk disclosure assessment, right? Based on whatever is actually being done by, let's say, the leaders in the industry or bigger entities that have actually already done some assessment. So that's actually an example of an AI tool that allows you to do that kind of, help you with framing that assessment and allowing you to, get into that space. The other one that I should mention is there's another team within CSIRO and Data 61 that's looking at intersecting or combining adaptation literature with climate data. So one of the big challenges that we have seen is, people look at this climate information, climate risk information, and climate data, and then they ask the question, so what? What can I actually do about the risk that I'm seeing? And then there's a lot of adaptation science that is being done in different sectors, in ag, in infrastructure, and so on. The problem is these two are not linked. Okay, so we are actually trying to figure out if we can link these two things to provide better advice. It's actually a tool that actually helps people gain a bit of an understanding of what are your risks and what can you do about it. Okay, and the last one is Foresight, which is a tool that is specifically being developed for physical risk assessment, which is actually starting to become a challenge where you've got to do these kind of assessments at a very granular spatial scale and temporal scale. So earlier it was okay to say, look, my risk profile is so, and a lot of the risk assessments that we have seen is less of a risk assessment, more of an exposure assessment. But increasingly, there's a lot more sophistication that is needed when you do such risk assessment. And it also has to be aligned with some of the standards that are coming through, such as the ASB2 standards or the TCFD standards. So I guess these are the three examples that I can actually think of.
Fantastic. Quite the toolkit that you're sitting on there. It's many tools for many different purposes. So I'm sure there's a lot of interest in finding out more about those. Thank you so much, Mahesh, Jeff, and Cara. Really appreciate you taking the time to share those insights and little tidbits about some of the research that you're doing in this space. Moana, I'll hand back to you to close the show.
Thank you. Well, team, I hope you can feel the passion that comes out of these researchers and why I do love working with CSIRO. I hope some of the information we have shared today shows we are listening and we are open to hearing from you as we continue to build this AI for Climate R&D roadmap and how we can best navigate and collaborate in this changing climate space. There's a reminder here on the screen of how to get involved, to complete the online survey, or reach out to get involved in our virtual roundtable discussions. If today's conversations have sparked ideas for you around how your organisation can leverage AI in climate efforts, we want to hear from you. So thank you for sharing your lunch break. My name is Moana Simpson. I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning of the day. I was too excited about getting started, and we're very, very happy that you were able to see how we're continuing to connect the dots in this AI climate opportunity. So thank you very much, everyone.